Welcome, guys, gals, and non binary pals. Today we are going to be discussing the ultimate guide to strategic planning for villainous enterprises. On our evil agenda for today, we have an intro of organization, strategic planning, the 5 stages of planning, a SWOT analysis, contingency planning, ethical and rule considerations, evaluations and outcomes, summary, and citations.
Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. The Strategic Planinator for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. A strategic plan involves us asking ourselves, who are we? Well, we are an organization with great plans to improve the tri-state area through the benevolent leadership of Heinz Doofenshmirtz. What do we want? We want to increase the influence of our organization. The tri-state area is a mess, and he just needs to rule it. We think we can make the area better by increasing control of our beloved Heinz Doofenshmirtz. How do we get there? Through strategic planninatoring. This is how we're going to get from where we are to where we want to be, ruling over the tri-state area. Doofenshmirtz Strategic Planninator. Why strategic planninators are so essential for any evil or non-evil organization. It's an ongoing process for any organizations. We ask ourselves, what are the best strategies to get where we want to go? Where do we want to go? And who are we? It involves analyzing many factors of an organization and provides clear plans to achieve our mission objectives. It's a plan to success. Amongst the many factors we can analyze in a strategic planinator is defining our mission objectives, finding opportunities for our organization, assessing threats for our organization, such as Alka or Perry the Platypus. We can also analyze forces and trends of the tri-state area. We can assess our funding and budgetary concerns. How do we keep funding all these amazing innators? And ensure our funding for the future as well. We can review our management and underlings. Which underlings are worth their pay, and which are just idling around and earning a salary? And is our current strategy getting us where we want to be? We are so often thwarted by Perry the Platypus or other Alka agents. How can we be more successful? How can we make an innator give us the tri-state area? Well, that's just what a strategic planinator is going to do for us. We're going to find success through understanding ourselves and understanding how to get what we want. Strategic planning is good for everyone. Strategic planning can be a tool you use in your own life. So this is an exercise for you who's reading this. Now, since we can't really ask you effectively, who are you? Because I think you would tell me your name. That isn't what we're looking at. That isn't what we're interested in. When we ask an organization, who are you? Don't mean what their name is. So we're talking about their ideal self and what they represent. So if you're going to use strategic planning in your own life for you, ask yourself, does this goal represent my ideal self? Or what is the goal of my ideal self? What is it that I want to achieve? And then look at what you're doing in your life and ask yourself, is what I am doing now, the strategies I am using now, the choices I am making now, going to end up in success in terms of my ideal self and representation? And then we can also ask, well, how can I analyze both the forces within myself and the forces outside myself to ensure my success? Now, I want you to take a few moments to really think about this. You're not going to be able to think about your whole self. That's a bit big of a question, but think about one particular goal that represents your ideal self and who you want to be. Are you doing what it takes to get there? And if not, how can you change to get there? And then how can you make a plan to get there? At the end of the day, that's what strategic planning can do for you.
When we talk about strategic planning, it's also important to talk about what makes up the 5 stages of planning. The 5 stages of planning are 5 different tiers, those tiers being looking at missions, goals, objectives, strategies, and budgets. So when we talk about missions, that's generally the mission statement of the organization. So why does the organization exist and what the organization is looking to do? These are often legitimized by the organization's task environment. When we talk about goals, that is broad statements of what the organization is hoping to accomplish. And then when we talk about objectives, that is whenever those goals are more specified of the accomplishments and what signifies that the goals have been achieved. Also, within the objectives, they are looking at how the goals will be put into day-to-day operations and how the achievement will be measured from short-term successes to long-term success. Strategies are specific plans of action designed to accomplish their goals. So that generally involves a plan of action and what resources they are going to utilize or implement to achieve their goals. And budgets are projections of future income expressed in dollar and cents. So that is looking at what income and what dollar and cents the organization already has and how are they going to bring in more revenue. On the previous slide, I talked about the 5 stages of planning when it comes to a general organizational style. But for this slide, I'm going to use the 5 stages of planning in regards to Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. So for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, their mission is they want to take over the world and they want to do evil. And Dr. Doofenshmirtz is the lead person of Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, and what drives him is that he has a desire for power and control. So with that being said, we are going to go into the goals of what Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated has. The first one, as I said, they want to maintain world domination. Dr. Doofenshmirtz, he also isn't very taken seriously throughout the show. He's constantly being compared to his brother. People kind of laugh at him. So one of his goals is that he wants to receive recognition. He wants to be taken seriously, but he also wants to seek out revenge against those people who are making fun of him, rather that be a childhood enemy, or rather if it's somebody that just simply annoys him. Another goal, which we'll talk about more in the SWOT analysis, but Dr. Doofenshmirtz, he recognizes his threat to his organization, and the threat to him is Perry the Platypus. So he has a goal throughout the show to make sure that there is no interference towards his mission and towards his organizational goals. He also wants to make sure that Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated has an evil legacy. He wants to make sure that it is an organization that is taken seriously. Objectives are making sure that your goals are effective. It's looking at it from a success standpoint. It's looking at it from day-to-day standpoint. So with the first goal, as I mentioned, he wants to achieve world domination. So how he does this is that he creates devices. Throughout the show, he makes several different devices. For example, there's 2 of them. The first one is the Weatherinator. So that is a device that he made where he can control the weather, and he uses bad weather conditions against his enemies, and those bad weather conditions make his enemies comply for his desire of power and control. The second one is the Forgetinator, which is a device that makes people forget certain events and people. So he creates these inventions to manipulate people's perceptions and to get back at other people. So with him doing that, he is achieving his goal of domination. And it does create a small chaos within his community. And that small chaos can lead to something bigger. It could signal that Dr. Doofenshmirtz had success with these 2 devices where he made people forget things and he was able to control the weather, and that can make people think that Dr. Doofenshmirtz has the capability to manipulate a larger system. From day-to-day operations, if they are continuing to make these devices, which they do throughout the show, they can look and see that the devices are being made at a appropriate time, that the impact of the device is successful, and that it has a desired effect of what they want it to do, and what was the overall reaction in regards to the device. As I mentioned, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, he wants to leave a legacy, and he often feels like that he is not taken seriously. So something that he could do to analyze that he is having success with that goal is, do other evil organizations know who he is? Is Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated talked about in general public sources? Has there been an increase in business? That's something that he can really look for to see if he is achieving that goal of leaving a legacy for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. Another thing that he can do is making sure that he has strong marketing items, such as having a strong logo and having a strong corporate identity where people know what Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated is. And throughout the show, mostly it is him by himself. So something that he could do to leave a legacy is to do some more team building. Um, and with more team building, people might see the organization to be more of a real organization where they can, you know, go out into the community and it can be seen as being more serious. Another goal that he has, as I mentioned, is defeating Perry. So what can you do to see if that is a significant success? So that is maybe Dr. Doofenshmirtz looking for, did he have success in his plans for a significant amount of time? Did Perry the Platypus look not as equivalent as he normally does? From a day-to-day standpoint of what they can do to make sure that that goal is successful is creating a plan and analyzing what Perry's capabilities are and looking at if they can use those capabilities as a threat. Maybe they could do some reverse psychology and get Perry on their side, um, so that there isn't that organizational threat anymore. And then strategies. So some different strategies that they could do, like I mentioned, is product creation. So they can continue making products, and making those products can continue to maintain buzz about these products. Um, with that being said, he could also create psychological warfare, so that is using fear and manipulation to control the public. He could benefit from some collaboration. So we don't really see that in Phineas and Ferb, but he could collaborate with other partnerships to expand upon his power and to expand upon his legacy. Throughout the show, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is often, like I said, not taken seriously. People laugh at him. So something that he could consider is a brand reinvention. As I mentioned, he doesn't have a lot of team partners. He doesn't really have a lot of collaboration. So that might be something that he might want to consider for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated to be successful. And then also setting realistic goals. So he wants to maintain world domination. He should focus on goals that are smaller milestones so that he can be onto the path of achieving world domination. But setting smaller goals would be smarter for him going forward. And then utilizing media. So is he online? Is he on social media that people are, finding out what Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated is and that there is strong marketing. And then budgeting. That is also something that we don't really see that much in Phineas and Ferb as far as like what the financial gain and what Dr. Doofenshmirtz already has in play. But something that he could do is he could sell those devices, as I mentioned, as a strategy. He could make money off of them, so he could sell them to the general public. He could also sell them to the black market, and that might be a good strategy for him as well, because on the black market there are other villains on the black market, so he could also get a monetary value that way, but he could also get some collaboration, by selling those devices on the black market as well. And then, as I mentioned, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, he really is kind of a standalone type of guy. Something that he could do to expand his services is that he could kind of offer a more outreach component. So there might be people in his community that might need help with committing evil. So something that he could do for a monetary gain is that he could set up consultations where he can debate rather if he's going to help somebody, commit evil or not. And then also he could join platforms such as TikToks and things like that where you can gain, profit towards the organization that way.
All right. Now that we have discussed what strategic planning is and the 5 stages of strategic planning, I want to shift gears a little bit and discuss the SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis, or SWOT matrix, is a tool that will be quite helpful when evaluating your organization during the strategic planning process. It can be used to assess any part of your organization structure by evaluating your company's internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. From marketing and fundraising, managing all your abandoned properties, or finally defeating that pesky platypus, the SWOT analysis is going to be Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated #1 tool for finally taking over the tri-state area. If you want to know a little bit more about the SWOT analysis, click on the video in the bottom right-hand corner. When evaluating a company with the SWOT analysis, it's important to know what you're looking at. As we stated previously, a SWOT analysis determines an organization's internal strengths and weaknesses and their external opportunities and threats. But what are those exactly? Internal strengths are things an organization does well to provide a competitive advantage. Internal weaknesses are shortcomings that cause a challenge to the organization. External opportunities are factors that are beneficial to the organization, and external threats are factors that are harmful to the organization. Now that we know what a SWOT analysis is, it's time to go over the 7 simple rules for successful SWOTing. Number 1, determine the subject of your analysis. What do you want to focus on building your brand? Do you want to find new consumers for your inventions? Or maybe even recruit henchmen to help you with your evil plans? Number 2, build your team. Find people who are interested in you and your success. Just watch out for infiltrators and others who will try to thwart your plans. Number 3, be honest and realistic. Consider sending out surveys to individuals within your organization or community. And consider using the Truthinator. That way you can get honest feedback. Number 4, figure out where you are and where you want to go. Today's things are internal. Tomorrow's things are external. For example, it's not a strength that your company has invented a Freezinator when the tri-state citizens are worried about climate change. That's an opportunity. Likewise, it's not a weakness that Agent P is constantly thwarting your plans. That's a threat. Number 5, be specific. Nobody takes us seriously isn't specific. Who doesn't take you seriously? Or what about your organization is not taken seriously? Number 6, evaluate based on your competition. Are you in a better or worse position to take over the tri-state area at the current moment? Do you have any unknown competitors you aren't considering? Number 7, keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Utilizing an outside facilitator can help with this. They can keep you on track or make sure you haven't overlooked any areas of concern. Before you create your own SWOT analysis for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated on the next slide, we have provided a sample analysis to get you started. Remember, you can use a SWOT analysis to evaluate any area within your organization. The one we have provided is just a general overview. Internal strengths of Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated would include strong brand recognition, such as the Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated jingle, a small dedicated staff that keep payroll low and plans compartmentalized. A small staff is also helpful for focusing on the mission of taking over the tri-state area, which is single-minded in nature. Weaknesses are poor reputation, being an evil corporation is like that sometimes, and high operational costs. External opportunities would include a monopoly on the market and untapped resources. External threats are Agent P, betterwise known as Perry the Platypus, and the OWCA, Organization Without a Cool Acronym, who are constantly trying to stop the organization's evil plans. And there you have it. Now that you've seen what a SWOT analysis entails, how to create a simple SWOT analysis, and a sample SWOT analysis for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, we would like for you to create your own SWOT analysis. Follow the link below to learn more about Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. Once you do that, then click on the SWOTinator to complete a SWOT analysis. Once you complete your SWOT analysis, post your findings and harmonize. Thank you.
Contingency planning is anticipating an event or a disaster that is likely to lead to change. And what that organization is going to do to prepare for the significant changes and adaptations that they're going to have to implement. So this kind of revolves around the organization having to ask themselves the question of how are they going to respond if that change or if that natural disaster does happen. This concept can kind of be looked at as an insurance policy and what they would do if the natural disaster happens or if the event happens. So going back to Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, there could be some contingency planning for that organization. As I mentioned before, Dr. Doofenshmirtz makes these devices. He might want to sell those devices to the general public or the black market. But a question that he has to ask himself is, what is he going to do if those devices fail or if there's something wrong with them? So contingency planning for Dr. Doofenshmirtz could be that he could spin it as a collector's item if the device didn't work. He could say it was just meant for decor only, that it wasn't intended for the original use, kind of spin the use language of what it was really intended for. He could have a backup device, so he could introduce a plan B if the first launch of the device failed. Or if he really wanted to, if he felt that he wanted to make that monetary commitment, he could hire a team of engineers to fix or redesign the invention that failed the first go around. Another thing that I mentioned is Dr. Doofenshmirtz could get some more press. As we know with press, it could go to bad press about the creation of the devices, about Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated as a whole. So there are some ways that Dr. Doofenshmirtz could contingency plan in the event of that change. He could blame Perry the Platypus for the interference of the devices. He could say that it was compromised by Perry the Platypus. Going back to the Weatherinator device, he could just blame it on the weather, that it was natural causes, that he had no type of control over that. He could blame it on another villain if there was another villain within the Phineas and Ferb realm, so that Dr. Doofenshmirtz doesn't have to take full responsibility of it. Or he could go a different approach. Dr. Doofenshmirtz, he could hire a PR team, and that PR team could help him take responsibility and kind of come up with a approach that doesn't hurt him. So what that could look like is that they could launch a media campaign. They could release a press release or apology video from Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and then that video and that apology can make him look like that he had well-meaning, that they just misunderstood and that he was just trying to help. So that is contingency planning that he could use if it were to be bad press in regards to his organization or the creation of these devices. He could maintain a bad rep for Perry, that his arch nemesis. So what he can do is that he can create a device specifically for Perry. He could implement some reverse psychology tactics. And then he could face some repercussions with financial and resources. So for some contingency planning that he could do for that is that he could repurpose materials when he's making those devices, making sure that he's really stretching out all of his resources in regards to that and making sure no materials go to waste. If it's a matter of him running out of money, that he is unable to craft these devices and sell them or make them for his mission, he could reach out to other evil entities, other organizations that may be willing to help him, or he could reach out to an evil loan place that might loan him some money. But those are some contingency plannings that he might want to consider if, what he intends for his organization does backfire. He would want to have a response and have a protocol of what to do in that event.
Hello everybody. Next I want us to take a look at the ethical and rural application of strategic planning. So when you're incorporating strategic planning into nonprofit organizations, even those with, let's say, unconventional missions like Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, it can involve addressing some unique ethical considerations, especially in rural settings. So if we take a look at those, we have a list here of some of the considerations. Prioritizing the mission. I think it's important that your goals are aligning with the core mission of your organization. Additionally, you want to ensure that your mission is something that has a positive purpose and does not harm the community. Okay. Transparency with organizational operations. So you want to clearly communicate your plans, any decisions, financial information, any of those things need to be communicated to individuals of relevance, like your stakeholders. You want to make sure you're keeping accurate records and provide accessible reports, to the public. Inclusion and equity. So In this, you might want to consider involving like diverse voices in the planning process. This can be staff, volunteers, or even members of the communities in which you serve. And you also want to take into consideration the risk for power imbalances. That could potentially also exclude marginalized groups from this process. Another major thing to consider is ethical leadership. Okay, so within that, you're wanting to make sure you have fair wages and benefits, and you're prioritizing a healthy work-life balance for employees. You want to address any type of burnout risks and make sure you're creating a positive work environment. Also strong ethical leadership as far as your leaders, and then continuous trainings for leaders and the employees to prevent any type of discrimination or harassment in the workplace. Another major thing to consider when it comes to the rural application as well is that for dual relationships and the risk of confidentiality breaches. So with rural communities, it can be a little bit challenging just because often we are very familiar with the people in which we share that community with. And in this particular organization, the founder is very involved in local activities. So it's really important that we navigate these dual relationships carefully just to prevent any types of conflict of interest. Okay. Then there's technology and privacy. So you're wanting to prioritize like the responsible collection and storage of any type of data, making sure you're using the technology ethically. Don't want to put yourself in a position for manipulation or any form of that in your communications. Social and environmental responsibilities. So from a social perspective, you want to avoid any partnerships with organizations that could potentially conflict with the ethical standards of this organization. And then as far as environment, maybe take into consideration the environmental impact of operations. Is this, sustainable sourcing, or are we doing what we can to reduce waste? Then there is the respect for community. You want to develop plans with communities that you serve rather than imposing your own agenda on them. So that with, not for concept. You're wanting to really work with them to provide what it is that they need. Then we have ethical guidelines. So you want to have really strong ethical guidelines that show up in the form of policies within the organization, just to make sure that they align with any relevant ethical codes. And you want to review them often and consistently offer trainings for these to make sure everybody is always updated on any changes that take place. And then you have regular assessment of the organization, kind of like what we are going over today when it comes to planning and really reviewing where we are with things. So you want to assess whether your programs are truly a benefit to your communities. And then from the rural considerations aspect, you do often run into some challenges in rural areas. So strategic planning needs to consider things like the limitation of resources. Sometimes there's fewer funding opportunities and limited access to donations when it comes to rural locations. You could potentially run into issues when it comes to location and the potential for isolation. That means limited access to services without added travel or expenses. Workforce limitations, where you may run into challenges with less skilled or experienced workers. There could be limitations to internet access, potentially affecting any type of communication or delivery of certain services. And then also the demographics. So often we find aging populations in rural communities, whereas youth tend to migrate more towards urban areas. Another thing to consider is looking at the community's strengths. Okay, so things like, community engagement, those strong social ties that come from rural locations. If you can focus on building strong partnerships, Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated could really enhance its operational effectiveness and potentially better serve the rural communities. Another thing then would be the culture and traditions. That's typically very rich in rural areas, and so that could be a large factor in having successful services as well. Then you have the rural community engagement. So you want to make sure that you're engaging maybe local leaders, so maybe local farmers, educators, small business owners, using the kind of informal networks. So you have your church groups and community centers, engaging them to help with these decisions. You want to host meetings, make sure they're held at convenient times and locations. There's consideration for access to them so that there are a variety of voices available. Always incorporate technology wherever possible, things like social media or community radio, to ensure that you're making sure everybody is given the fair opportunity to have a say and see what's going on as far as this planning process. Another thing to consider then are measurable outcomes and then adjusting plans. So when it comes to the measurable outcomes, you're wanting to use methods, sometimes like something like maybe community feedback sessions. Okay, so where you can really get more of a qualitative response. And then adjusting plans, as you would with any other thing, you want to review what's working, what's not, and make adjustments. Certain things to consider with rural areas may be any type of seasonal changes or potential like shifts economically. The next part I want us to take a look at are the measurable outcomes and progress evaluation. So when you're incorporating these into strategic planning, it's pretty essential for nonprofits that you use these to enhance the impact and operational efficiency of the services. So these practices will tend to demonstrate accountability to stakeholders and then also provide insight into necessary improvements. So when we look at the measurable outcomes and progress evaluation, we want to consider the importance of it. So we know, this is why we need to commit to doing these and following through with them. One of the things to consider is that your measuring alignment is in line with your mission and effectiveness. So your measuring outcomes will then ensure that these activities or services are effectively advancing your mission. Without doing this evaluation, it can be challenging to confirm whether the impact is actually being achieved. And so by analyzing the data, Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated could potentially adapt approaches and perhaps shift from the more overtly evil schemes to maybe some more community-friendly inventions that would still kind of fulfill his creative ambition. So that's something to consider in that regard. Another thing to look at as far as the importance is optimizing the efforts and the services. So doing these regular assessments of the programs will allow for your organization to identify which of your initiatives really yield the best results. And then you can make informed decisions about where any type of resource allocation needs to take place. This ultimately ensures that time, funds, and efforts are going to be invested in the areas with the highest impact. And then you have the review and renew process. So this ongoing evaluation so that you're constantly really taking a look at things and seeing what changes need to happen. So this will help for better outcomes overall. And this approach can also promote learning and development within the organization. So just consistent overall growth. So when it comes to measurable outcomes and progress evaluation, we want to also consider the implementation process. Okay, so this looks like the following here. Defining clear objectives. So you want to make sure that you establish specific and measurable goals. Okay. Developing relevant measuring tools. You want to make sure that the metrics that you use can align with your objectives and will accurately reflect the outcomes of your programs and services. This can involve things like, maybe tracking the success rate of inventions or community engagement levels, something that's providing data to inform maybe future strategies that you would take. And then you want to collect and analyze your data. So implementing this data collection method is going to allow for regular analysis of the data to help in understanding any trends, again, the impacts, and then foster making evidence-based decisions. It also encourages collaborative efforts towards achieving the organization's mission. And then you want to refine the strategies based on the data for future planning. So using the insights that you gathered from the evaluations, you're going to go in and refine your programs. And then in doing this, you would like to engage your stakeholders in this process. It's important for them to have a perspective, and it'll provide different perspectives, which will ultimately enhance the effectiveness of the different interventions. So by implementing measurable outcomes and progress evaluations, your organization can enhance the effectiveness, demonstrate accountability, and foster continuous improvement. Thank you, everyone of Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, for joining us in this training on strategic planning today. We hope that you have taken a lot from this to apply to your organization. So with this last slide, I just want to recap on what we've covered today. So when it comes to strategic planning for organizations, we want to first and foremost understand what the process is, what the purpose is, and the pros and cons of utilizing it. We then want to make sure that we're familiarizing ourselves with the 5 types of planning. That includes mission, goals, objectives, strategies, and budgets. We want to also utilize strategic planning tools like what we covered today with the SWOT analysis. That's taking a look at an organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then we want to implement contingency planning. That is very important as far as looking for success, because we want to be able to strategize and address any potential unforeseen events or circumstances that could potentially push you further back. We then want to consider the ethical and rural applications, as we just previously discussed, making sure we're covering all areas to ensure inclusivity and making sure that we are including the cultures in reference to better serve these communities. We then want to establish progress evaluations and the measurable outcomes. Again, we went over the importance of that to be able to review and assess to see what is effective and what still needs changes. And then finally, we want to achieve the objectives and effectively respond to any opportunities and challenges we then face. So by understanding and applying these components, the organization can navigate any type of strategic planning processes effectively. And then as a result, will be put in a position where they are able to achieve their objective and respond well in any circumstances that arise. And so when applied correctly, the strategic planning enables the organization to align their unique mission with any community needs, creates sustainability, and hopefully then positive impact. By addressing any ethical considerations, especially those in a rural context, and implementing some evaluation metrics, the organization can navigate any challenges and then foster some trust and again ultimately achieve its overall objectives. So when you're integrating these practices, even with maybe the most unconventional nonprofit organizations like yours, you can still enhance the effectiveness of your organization, create a good community standing, and overall success. And that concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for joining us.